Father Cruz is pastor of St. John Chrysostom, and also works for is in charge of Bronx Catholic Charities, and just has a ton of experience and so many wonderful stories. So, without further ado, I leave you with Father Cruz.
Tons of experience.
Yes.
Good watch. My goodness. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Back there? Good. If you have a question, I might ask you to raise your voice because I'm hard of hearing, okay? It's good to be with you here. Thank you, Christy. And I want to thank Joe and his brother, who are the owners here, Antonio, for hosting this 6 weeks and beyond. I know they'll be willing to. We're not quite in competition, but Fordham University has theology on tap at the beer hall. There's too much noise there. Over here, you're a little isolated and the food's better. So, I know when the topic, title, which I worked as a journalist, and one of the hardest things for me to do was always to come up with a caption or a title, a headline, especially for something I write. So when I came up with Finding God, South Bronx to South Bend, it was really a cop-out, because I happen to live in both places, and they both had the word South in the title. But I'm going to ask you, for the purposes of, you're going to have to stay with me on a journey, and it's going to be a journey that begins with a simple question. I ask you to think about it, if you can answer it for yourself. What has been, or what is, the most important event, moment of your life? One answer is pretty obvious, the birth of your first son. But what would be the most important event of your life up to this point? Well, what do you mean by important? You're going to have to define that. Is it the most powerful moment for you? Is it a life-changing moment? Is it the moment that, perhaps it's a moment that opened your eyes to something? Or perhaps it's something you didn't expect? What is it? That's the preface. That's the open door to finding God. Now, we know St. Paul had a magnificent experience being knocked off his rear end off the horse. Well, he found God up close and personal with a lightning bolt. I grew up 15 minutes south of here in St. Augustine's Parish. No longer standing, we just finished tearing it down. It was the mother church of the borough when it was built. Fremont Avenue was Westchester County. So all of those churches did not belong to the city. So in the Bronx, St. Augustine's was the oldest, no matter what the sign says outside of St. Raymond's, that's revisionist history. When I graduated high school, some 36 years ago, if my math doesn't fail me, just a few months after that, Friday night, the first Friday night of that August, a few weeks from starting college, moving out to the Midwest. I remember Father Arcee, who was the associate, now retired, living here at Our Lady of Mercy. He was on vacation. They asked me to translate the bulletin from English to Spanish while he's away. That Friday night, there's always Spanish choir practice. We were there with CYO, although we never went to the meetings, I have to confess. We would hang around there outside the rectory, because once everyone left at 10:30 in the evening came the football. We were going to start playing football under the lights, no matter what the weather. That evening, choir practice ended, and I can't, this is where my memory just doesn't come together. I was putting the papers down on the rear end of a car, the trunk. Someone called my name. I can't tell you who, but I heard my name. I turned around, I don't remember who. We started talking, and I know it was 10:30, about 10:30, because choir practice, we were just coming out of the church. So we're talking, and like we do in the Bronx, you lean against the car. I sat up on the truck, and we're talking more. Next thing I know, I hear, the engine turned on, and the car took off. I was a little startled. I reached for the papers, and I jumped off. I just hopped off. But the gal, really, she was burned rubber. She took off. I stumbled backward and hit my head on the curb. I was out. Well, not immediately. Rolled over, fell on my back, hit the head. It was one of those, when you're a kid, you hear the impact. Boom, thud. I heard it. I tried to get up immediately, and I'm like, whoa. I laid down. I don't know if anyone saw it. I don't know if the person who I was speaking with saw it till this day. I laid down, clear sky, deep breath, on all fours to jump up on my feet, and I collapsed. I fell on my back again. All I can tell you that at that moment, I was at peace. I can't describe it. There are no words. But I was in a perfect state of peace. It's like a very deep sleep. But there was an awareness. I didn't see light. I didn't see a ray of sunshine. I didn't see clouds. What I did know, God's presence. And all he said, not your time. My memory, I jump on my feet and start cleaning my clothes. That's how it works for me. EMT's there. My friends are there. Choir members are there. What are you looking at? I just fell. I'm playing football. This isn't unusual. What are you looking at? What's your name? My name is Eric Cruz. Where do you live? 1343 Washington Avenue. How old are you? 36. And I collapsed again. I was like those puppets with the string. You cut the string. That's what happened. I just collapsed. Pancake. Combine, piece it all together. You were out 20 minutes. You were looking up at the night sky. Back then, EMT wasn't obliged to do CPR until you get to the hospital. So once they thought you were gone, they stopped. And that's what happened. They stopped the CPR, whatever it is they were doing. EMT, and it was friendly ambulance service. They were free community service. EMTs, they purchased a townhouse, a block from the church. That's where they lived. They provided free medical care on an emergency basis. No charge. So they were the ones who responded. Knocked on the door, they came. Hospital, a year recovery. That's the Reader's Digest first. Wow. That's a really important moment in your life. When I got to college first year, I was like, I got a second chance. I'm going to party like there's no tomorrow. And that's what happened the first year. You're not in New York. You're not in the Bronx. You're away 783 miles to be exact from here. And it was a frat atmosphere in the dorm on a very Catholic campus. And that's what happened. Life-changing. Yeah. But looking back on it now, it was the wrong direction. But it's life-changing, very powerful. But if someone were to have asked me the question a few years ago, I would not have talked about this traffic accident. When I graduated college, student loans up to here, everyone knows it, right? Some of you are still paying them off. And I finally finished, thank God. Get a phone call on us. This was when I was a newspaper reporter, the Chicago Tribune. Saturday, my day off, I get a phone call from an attorney. You need to pay more on your back on your loans. When the paying isn't enough, they're going to take you to court. So I had to go fax a check on a Saturday, send a check on a Monday. Is that my dinner? Make sure to take care of these guys, especially him. So, I lost the court case. The judge didn't want anything to hear of it. He ordered to garnish wages. And when they didn't know they garnished your gross pay, not your net. So you're getting, it was about 30% that they were taking from every check. So I lost my apartment, I lost the car. And quite honestly, I was stripped of any sense of dignity I had. First one to finish college. What am I going to tell mom? What am I going to tell my siblings? What am I going to tell my friends who I've been working with in Chicago and South Bend? What am I going to tell them? What am I going to tell their kids who are my stepchildren? So it was really you're stripped of your dignity and your pride and you were left with nothing. I just started to collect boxes to start packing everything in and just come back east. But in all of that, I remember sitting in my apartment the last few days. All the lights were off. And really all I had was phone service. And I was like, really? Is this where we've come? Is this where we are? After all this time? Moved out, lived in a homeless shelter. The only one in that part of the country that had multiple services. So I lived there for almost 6 months with no one knowing. From work or my friends, no one knew. Until there was a new director who I went to college with. And of course ran into Lou Nani there. I was this close to taking my life. I tried and failed. What's the most important moment of your life? And it wasn't the moment where I faced death, although I was dead 5 years prior on the streets here in Bronx. It was the moment where I received a phone call at the center. And it was from a gentleman, his name was Jack Reed. I was a newspaper journalist, he was the deputy mayor, and I was on a through council. I don't know how he found out or who told him. I don't know how anyone found out, and it has to be Lou who started to call people I knew at work otherwise. But Jack called me. He said, don't say a word. Don't ask me any questions. We have all of the money you need to pay everything you owe. Except one more. I had to pay before I entered the seminary. They didn't know that at the time. It was 15 years prior to entering the seminary. Well, we have everything. And I started to say, what are you talking about? He kept saying, shut up. Oh, you don't ask any questions. What do I need to do? You don't need to do anything but say thank you. A lot of people know, all of these people care. People that just, they love you. They don't even want to tell you who they are specifically. take it and start brand new again. And keep on going. But, you know, you're asking questions again. I told you don't ask anything. You're not going to get any answers. All you need to do is say that. That's the last conversation I had with Jeffrey. Never saw him again or heard from him again from that point on. Now, I lived with some friends, get back on my feet. Their children were my students. We were very close. And they were co-workers. Finally returned to New York, actually on my way to DC to work for C-SPAN. There was this new toy in the country called the internet. And they needed someone who knew about it to work for C-SPAN. And all C-SPAN did was cover Congress. That's all they did. They did nothing else. So I'm packed, going to Washington. The government decided to cut the position so I didn't have a job. Came right to New York. And a month later, after attending Mass at St. Augustine's, that Monday I called and applied for the seminary. Because I felt called to the priesthood when I was 11. And I was confirmed at 12. Is that the fire of faith is never extinguished. It's always burning. I mentioned Bob Arcee earlier, the priest. When I was recovering in the hospital, and this is a friend of mine told me, he used to always say, he's alive because of his faith. And I'm thinking, I'm strapped down. I was strapped down. I had hemorrhaging in the brain. I was violent because of what's going on here. And my faith saved me. It didn't make sense. I couldn't process. Until now. 30 years later. Still processing what's important. What's the most important event on your journey? Maybe you don't have one yet. Sometimes it's the softest and littlest thing in the world that has happened in your life. Because a lot of time the little things open up the great gifts and open up the great future. There's a tremendous challenge. One thing I can't stand hearing is you're the future of the church. I think that's ridiculous. Because you are the church. You're not the future. You're the current. You're the present. You're the church. The challenge is, and you know it as well as I do, you're here in a world of busy. You're here tonight in a world of distractions. You're here tonight against the challenges of being drawn somewhere else. Maybe you're here trying to find God. I don't know that. But life is always that search for God, for the gifts that He has given you, and to discover that for yourselves, about yourselves. Finding God isn't limited to, thankfully, all of us will not have to go through a near-death experience to say it's so important. Nor will you have to go through a homeless shelter and be stripped of everything to discover what's important. But I bring those examples up because we must return into and reflect and think about our journey up to this point and where we're going and where we hope to go. I'm no theologian. I don't come to Theology on Tap to talk to you about spiritual exercises. And I'm not going to talk to you about canon law. Someone else can do that. Okay? We used to say in the seminary, we need a little less theology and more humanity. But the humanity begins with us and our reflection in Jesus Christ, God made man. And the journey with him, or the discovery of him. Or the discovery of him. I always say God is the God of surprises. You don't know what's around the corner waiting for you with him. 4 years ago, I was pastor of Christ the King in 2 other parishes. That when I met you, when I was at Christ the King, we went to Notre Dame for the youth encounter. One day I get a phone call and I had the flu like there's no tomorrow. After the new year, I want to talk to you about a housing project. This is Catholic Charity. All right. I had just inherited Our Lady of Victory. The pastor died. A nice property we could build around the church. First Monday of the new year, 5 years ago. I'm in the office downtown, and I'm really not there. He's talking, but I'm not hearing anything. Until he said, the cardinal will like another, archbishop at the time, Dolan would like another priest involved with Catholic Charities, and he thinks it should be you. Well, the fever broke and my ears opened up. I mean, what did you just say? Aren't you involved with Catholic Charities? Before I could say a word, he said, let's go to lunch. 4 hours later, think about it. Let's be realistic. When the Archbishop of New York tells you he'd like you to do something, there's not much discussion to think about. Right? And I thank him for at least making helping me think that I have a choice in this. So I appreciate that. Right? 4. 3 months later, I met again, this time with the Archbishop Cardinal Dolan. And I was going to ask him, who suggested me? Who recommended me? Or why did you choose me? That was my question. And he said, no, your brother priest thinks so highly of you. They said you were the first person that came out of their mouth. I'm like, you're a liar. You know that? He wasn't going to answer my question, obviously. And off I went. I had to take them. I was scared to death. 25 years not in school, except for the seminary. I don't count that. 25 years since I went to college. And I had to go back and get an MBA. And I don't have no business degree background whatsoever. So I prayed a lot to the Divine Mercy, because that's the only way I got this master's degree. I was the oldest guy in the class. And I said, please don't ask me to go back to school again. I'm now in my mid-50s. Please, no mas. God of surprises. But you discover something new about yourself. At this new stage, no matter how old you are. How do you find God in all of this mess? Right? Obviously, we have to start with prayer. Especially in the midst of the mess, the busyness, the temptations, the distractions at work, the distractions in relationships, the busyness of the noise. How many more bombings? How many more shootings? How many more stabbings? All of the movements around the country that bombard us. The constant threat of just violence, terrorism. Finding God in the midst of all this. If you are an introvert, a lot of people would be shocked because I think I'm an introvert. I think so. Good. You're going to be probably attracted to some type of beauty. You need to define beauty. But for someone who's seeking God, the beauty is in the peace and in the oasis that you create for yourself. Maybe it's college students, and university chapel. Taking 15 minutes before you retire every evening, thinking about the day, what did I miss? I had this chance, I messed up. I said the wrong thing, or I didn't say anything. Someone came to me, I walked away. You don't punish yourself, but you see it as a moment. Every encounter is an opportunity to find God, especially in humanity, not out there. So the encounter, an introvert will tend to like oasis and peace, a little silence in a day of interaction and busyness. Now I would suggest that to anybody, but an introvert is more inclined and it's easier for that type of person. Those tend to be shy and timid in a public setting. Finding God, revealing the other, your gifts, letting loose, putting it in God's hands, opening up in your time with God. So that sense of beauty, maybe it's art, maybe it's music. What do you listen to? What type of music do you hear or you haven't tried? Right? Do you just go take a walk, go to City Island and walk on a beautiful sunny day? Finding God in the ordinary. You don't need to look for the thunder and the lightning to find Him. Because in the ordinary is where you will sense His presence and see the beauty of the Creator Father. Very simple act that begins in finding God. If you're an academic and you like books, what do you read? Finding God in the spiritual works. I mean, I always tell, go to St. Augustine and read the Confessions. Fine. A lot of people discover much reading that. Well, you can read C.S. Lewis or G.K. Chesterton, Mere Christianity, a wonderful work. Mother Teresa, there was and it's still sitting in my car, Service to Mercy. Service to Mercy. It's a book about her writings and her thoughts. It was published maybe a year ago, anticipating her canonization. I grabbed it because and I shouldn't say this is bad spiritual practice to say it, but I want to work on humility as a gift of mercy. You finding God is almost an exercise in humility. And what's humility? A lot of people think humility is many things, right? I mean, what would you think humility is? If you had to define it, how would you define humility? It's not easy. You might know it in principle here, but how do you describe humility to someone? Right? It's not playing the role of a manhole cover. Laying down on the street and letting everybody roll over you. That's not humility. That's masculine. Okay? That's what we deal with in domestic violence counseling for men or women. Right? Someone in a 25-year relationship and they've had 2 thrilling years. Low self-esteem is not humility. Thinking that you're worthless is not humility. That's a trap of this virtue. But humility, we could really simplify it. We say, thinking about another and seeking that other person's advancement, growth, salvation. simple definition of humility. The other. The other. Seeking the other's advancement and salvation, improvement, whatever word you want to use. Ultimately, it's salvation. That's the focus of humility. I say it's bad spiritual practice to say what I said. I want to be more humble because that is bringing the attention back to me. That's our secret. We'll edit that out. Hey, don't let my spiritual director know that I said that. Mine. Can you be humble and courageous? Can you be humble and headstrong? It's a balance. Usually when I have been asked to take possession of a parish, for the first time I did it at Christ the King. That was the year of the priest, the Jubilee year. So one of the things we did, speaking with my associate, let's have a night. We invite the community, men of mystery. They know us in our collars, but they don't know much about us otherwise. Let's just share who we are with them and answer questions about our family's vocations. He was from Africa, so very unique. You know, and he would share a story about the slaughter of his relatives in Africa. Another from Sudan. Huh? One question, we opened it up, and one of the gals, who's known me for a few years before I arrived at Christ the King, said, "Father, you're a very strong person. Isn't it hard to take orders, if you will, be obedient to like the cardinal or the archbishop?" And I just smiled because I thought it was a great question. That's a great question. And I said, no, it really isn't that hard. I'm a little older than the other. Like if you're 20 years younger than me, it might be a different answer. I said, no. I made a promise publicly. I have the respect and the opportunity to exchange with him. And as long as I have that, I recognize that he is the boss. Maybe I can convince him to allow certain things otherwise. Maybe I can't. That's okay. But there is a respectful relationship here. I have to acknowledge that it's not about me. Go to a parish. It's about what? I always suggest, God bless them, the young priest, what's your pastoral vision? Mine goes back to the gospel. Ut unum sint, may they all be one. Where you and I, Father, are one. One mind, one heart. One focus, salvation. The salvation of mine? No. Your salvation, ahead of mine. The power of marriage, finding God in marriage. The minute a husband or a wife or a girlfriend or boyfriend asks the other one, what are you going to do to make me happy? Better call a priest or a divorce lawyer. Because it's going down from there. Why? Because now it's about me, it's not about us. What do you have to do? Communication in a marriage. First, you recognize that God brought you together. God will keep you together. You must be a couple of prayer. You must be a couple of prayer. 50-50, Father. Then nope. It has to be 100 and 100. You're giving your entire self to him and him to you. Humility. God became man and died on the cross. Humility. We need less theology or spirituality and more humanity rooted in Christ. Finding God in the human, in the ordinary. Right? Well, everything's always, you're always looking at the glass half empty. You can't get a good word out of other folks. There's always the cynic. Sometimes we fall into that trap. Maybe we feel sorry for ourselves. Maybe things, it's one of those Murphy's Law days. I had those in the seminary in the parish. Nothing goes right. I said, Father, I'm getting in my car, I'm leaving. You're running the parish today. Good luck. Nothing's working right. Everything is a critique. Everything is a little joke with a little sharp tongue. A little edge. You're not going to find God. Get trapped in those practices. So I'll say, spiritual practice, you need to fast. And it's not fasting from eating meat on Friday or your worst meal something you don't like and eat that. No, don't punish yourself. The whole idea of fasting is to strengthen your resolve and focus again on God. So you fast from the cynicism. You fast from the sharp tongue. You fast from taking that first step before it's too late. Being attuned to what's happening. Mind and heart. It's a spiritual discipline. Finding God here means peace in the mind and the heart. And you have, sometimes it's focused attention. I know you have those moments when you know someone's coming and you really don't want to go into this meeting with that person because you're going to say the wrong thing. Or someone's coming, aquí viene, here comes the pain and the hoo-ha, and I got to deal with this now. But you know what? You say a quick prayer. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, slow down the heart. Lord, the gift of charity. Charity might mean biting the tongue and actually listening to what that person is saying. But it might actually be valid. Finding God in that relationship in you. The prayer of bringing Him in. The humility. Yeah, it's going to be tough dealing with her or him. But you know what? It's only a few minutes. Does it matter? So much more can come of it than what you fear. And you offer it up. A prayer of strength and perseverance. Simple prayer. Like my patron Peter drowning in the lake. Lord, help me. That's all you got to say. You don't need to come up with words. You say, Lord, give me the words. Give me the patience. Help me. St. Francis de Sales, Lord, I want to find you. Help me. Guide me. Simple. Right? Less theology, more humanity. More humanity. You're reading, like I said, of one of my favorite, and I recommend this book to everybody, The Return of the Prodigal Son, by Henry Nouwen. N-O-U-W-E-N. He passed away a few years ago. During the 2002 World Youth Day, he died in Germany. He wrote this wonderful book, The Return of the Prodigal Son. The famous picture by Rembrandt is on the cover. It has a fold, so you can always use it to mark the page. But you're always looking at the picture when you're marking the page. And he gives you a chapter about the son, the father, the brother, and everyone else who's watching in the darkness. And you will learn so much about yourself and your relationship. You will discover God in this book. I promise you that. Because you have to come back inside. And most of the time, you're going to be nodding your head reading this book. Make sure you have a marker, a pen, because you're going to go back and mark this book up numerous times. The Return of the Prodigal Son. Return of the Prodigal Son. Henry Nouwen. N-O-U-W-E-N. He's written a lot. There are shelves of his works. He can get pretty heavy sometimes and bring you down. You got to put him down and walk away sometimes, depending on what you're reading. This isn't one of those books, but there are other ones. They're like, I just can't take this right now. Walk away from it. That's it. Return of the Prodigal Son. And I was gifted a trip. This is a sidebar. I was gifted a trip to Russia a few years ago, and I went with some friends. And one of the days was a trip to the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. They have a whole section of Rembrandt. The only reason I wanted to go, and I'm not a museum person, was to see that painting that they had on a wall by itself as you're leaving the museum. That painting was there, and I just had to stand there and look at it. You couldn't take pictures because of the flash damage to the original painting. But it was right there, and it's huge. It's almost the height of this wall. It's not a little square thing. You could see it from 30 yards away and know what it is. Powerful, simple book that you go back. Finding God in your faith. I will never say buy the catechism and buy it and read it. It's too heavy. You really have to, you might have to struggle through it. It's just dense. It's not pleasurable reading. But you want to read the catechism, Father James Hardon, Hardon. He takes it and he writes it in a beautiful form that's very easy to read. Same exact information, but he rewrites it all for a layman, for a simple-minded priest, because the catechism itself has so many references and footnotes. It's a major encyclopedia. But the one by James Hardon is excellent to read. Hardon. I think he's a Jesuit. My dear brothers and sisters, it's important, and I'll go back and say this again, but especially for those who arrived a little late, a little after. One thing I don't like hearing is that you're the future of the church. Because it's not true. Because you are the church. You are members of the church. Your energy, your ideas, your leadership, your fidelity, your growth is essential to the renewal of the body, which is the church, in this little corner of God's universe and creation. Finding God, all we've done is talk about finding God amongst a group of faithful young adults. What about the disenchanted and the sick? I deal with Catholic Charities, and I can't tell you the cases that I deal with daily. And I thought it was bad as a news reporter. I worked as a news reporter in Chicago, police week for years. So I've seen the bloodiest of the bloodiest and the saddest of the saddest, from children to elderly, fires to homicides and suicides. And in this new calling with Catholic Charities, refugees and immigrants, the hungry and the homeless, and anyone who tells you that we do not have a hunger crisis is just lying. And if you think we have a hunger crisis, let me tell you, it's worse than you think. And it's 10 times worse than you think. Okay? So your energies and your enthusiasm and effort, but what about those folks who I'll categorize as disenchanted? Who are sick, who are alone, who've been abandoned, are elderly. That population's exploded. Abused by their kids, abandoned by family, nowhere to go, trapped in their homes. I go to the dementia wing and the Alzheimer's at Providence Rest and Bronx Next section. the Sisters of St. John the Baptist. My mother has advanced dementia. This is the first time I've had to deal with it as a family member, whereas I've dealt it as clergy otherwise. We'll have a prayer service. I'll have 3 priests and a few nuns with advanced Alzheimer's and dementia. They can still communicate. Prayer service, I give the blessing, and I hear all of the priests with their dementia and Alzheimer's repeating, joining me in the blessing and the prayer. God is still active in their lives. And the veterans that we work with, double amputees, Washington Heights, James Rivas. He stands on the corner of 181st Street and Pinehurst in his wheelchair looking for cigarettes. That's what he does every day. So I'll drive by and I'll see him. I'm going to buy you a carton today. I'm going to be back and we're going to have a serious talk. So we talk. We get him the services he needs. Okay? But he is so at peace. He is so happy. I'm envious. He is so filled with joy because he knows how good God has been to him, regardless of the double amputation. And being a vet in an apartment just off the river, or 1H, one day you can go with me and we'll visit. But he is so happy. He's so prayerful. And I'm jealous that I'm not that happy or prayerful like he is. But he is at peace. You want to find God? These places aren't bad places to find him because everyone is at peace. Nona Isabella at Providence Rest. I go in. I want to get a smile and just wonderful. I'll mention Bella Madonna, beautiful Madonna. That's her great granddaughter. It's not Mary, the mother of Christ. I mention that, she just starts talking about the great granddaughter from birth to where she is now. She doesn't talk about anything else ordinarily. I just mentioned those 2 words. Beautiful. Then she'll describe her to me. She'll point to the picture in her dresser, in her room, and God would baptize her. She'll give me the whole history every time. She found God, and he has been with her all along. Maybe those who are a little older, maybe near my age, looking for love in all the wrong places, and so on. I see no familiarity here, so no one is a good right? But you know what? The great saints went through that. They went looking for God in all the wrong places. Right? The one place they never went to was a church. They went looking for affairs, they went looking into the ocean, they went looking to Plato and Socrates, they were looking at nature. Great, they got a sense of it, but they were looking for him, couldn't find him. They were always hungry. They were never satisfied with what the world offered until they found that oasis of peace. And it's in the silence that we create for ourselves. 15 minutes, a half hour before you retire every night. A practice of just making yourself present to be found. And being found, you will find not just God, but about yourself. You never beat yourself up for having done something wrong. It's part of who we are. You say, Lord, thank you for allowing me to see this. Thank you for being there. Because in both those very hard, frustrating, sinful times, and in those beautiful, marvelous, joyful times that I don't always give you thanks, you are there. And I need you in both. I'm looking for you. Help me, guide me. help me find Him. Help me find Him. Finding God. You know, I started in South Bronx here, raised here. I went to study in South Bend, Notre Dame. Lived out there 15 years working in newspaper work, radio, TV work, education as well on the migrant farms. Every time I thought I was there, I realized, boy, I'm a lot farther than I thought I was. Because I never took the time to think about the moments. From the death to the homelessness, to the people who sacrificed, to the phone call from Jack Reed. They were all in isolation. And it wasn't until I just sat down literally and broke down and wept that it all came together. Coffee? Coffee? It all came together. The music you listen to. And I'll finish with this. You want to ask any questions, feel free to do so. I'm going to stand up. Is that okay? I got to move around. 7 years of studies to be a priest when I applied. I had to take 2 years of Greek and Latin, refresher courses in philosophy and theology. 1 year in between, before the Final Four, that we were sent to Pennsylvania, a year away from it all. And at that time in my life, I was thrilled to get away from it all. Right? I'm in my 30s. There was 20 of us. Lehigh Valley, the highest peak. There was a seminary. That's where we lived. You may or may not know the Ignatian Retreat, 30 days of silence with one spiritual guide. Well, we had a 7-day version. Charlie McManus, Monsignor McManus was my assigned guide. He said, well, you know, Eric, I'm going to give you 3 scripture passages. You choose one. This is like midway point, halftime of the retreat. You choose one, and let's talk about it in 2 days. The crucifixion. This is your mother. This is your son. Take off. The Garden of Gethsemane. The Lord perspires blood. Can't remember the third one. That was immediately out. That's probably why I don't remember it. But I said, oh yeah, you know, the crucifixion. Mary's there. That's where I'm going to be. That's what I'm going to pray over and read. 2 days. That's it. You know. I read it. Went to Luke's Gospel. I read the agony in the garden. That's what I stayed with. Stayed with the agony of the garden. You weren't supposed to use anything on retreat. It was just prayer and reading, and only talk with your guide. I put my earphones on. World Youth Day, Denver, We Are One Body by Donna. I put it on my, whatever we were using, cassettes, whatever it was back then, the earphones. I read the gospel again. The more I read it, and I always pray before you're going to meditate with scripture, just open my heart, open my mind to your movements, to your inspiration. I did that, read it once, earphones on, reading it again, stayed with it, read it a third time, and this time I started hearing the words of the song for the first time. At the name of Jesus, every knee shall bend. What you have done to me, I'm mixing verses into one. For what you have done for us, you have set us free. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And I wrote down tears at that moment. Because I learned something about myself at that moment. And I learned that God found me at that moment. Right? Discernment is discovering God's will for each of us. But in that discernment, in that moment, God found me. Because why? And this is public, I'm not sharing anything I haven't shared. I had a very difficult time with my mom as a kid and through high school. And I preach on this on retreat sometime, you know. The whole idea of love. Oh, we're gonna love everybody. I love the whole world. Oh, you're full of it. I'm sorry, you don't love everyone the same way. That's just not real. Right? I don't love my veal cutlet parm here the same way I love my mom. Not the same. I don't love all of you the way I love my mother. Okay? I could over time, but in reality, at this point, that's not the case. I will love my siblings as much as I love my mom. Okay? You don't fall into the trap of thinking that way. It's a spiritual danger. Because you're not finding God if you buy that blindly. Because you fall into the trap of holding everything in because I'm supposed to love everybody. It's an obligation and a law, not a human act of sacrifice and giving that love. So you hold it in and it eats you inside. And it's okay to confess and or admit that I'm angry at that person. I'm angry at so-and-so. And even say, yes, I hate what they've done to me. And you take it to God himself. You want to learn something about yourself? You go to God fearlessly. And I took it to him in my anger. All of these false sense of love that's inside. Because all that does, you become more stoic, more detached, less loving, more cold to the other. You will never find God there. And you can take it to him. I don't like this. I didn't like it. I don't like it. What are we going to do about it? And God is going to sit there and say, about time. About time. Let me lift this from you. You'll weep. You might even tremble, but you will be transformed in that instant. That will be lifted and removed from you. And then you begin brand new. The newness of life with God. The prodigal son or daughter has been found by the Father, and you have found him in a very powerful, human manner. Honesty. You want to, if you can't find the words, go to the book of Psalms in the Bible. They're all emotions. You'll find one. Thanksgiving, praise, anger, sorrow. But you'll notice that each psalm begins with thanks and ends with thanks. Thank you, Lord, for being here all the time. For the times that I didn't see you. But thank you for being there all the time. Let God find you. You will easily find him. And in a very wonderful way, you will find much of yourself in that reflection of God. Amen?
Amen.
Thank you so much. I went a little longer than I was planning.
So now we open it up for question and answer. So if anybody has